At this juncture, I want to a word of prayer.
Peter, you need to switch on your camera, we see you.
Forgive us of our trespasses, forgive those that trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, Lord, but deliver us from evil. For thine is thy kingdom, power, and the glory. You, O Lord, are highly lifted. You are our rock, you are our song, our sustainer, healer, and deliverer. You are our shield and defense, and we glorify and reverence you, O God. Thank you for calling us to the high calling, to defend the cause of the weak and the fatherless. You've called us to maintain the rights of the poor and the oppressed, O God, to rescue the weak and the needy, delivering them from the hand of the wicked. We thank you, Lord Jesus, for gathering us together on this webinar, different nations, different tribes, different tongues, all in the interest of orphan and vulnerable children. Your word tells us that where there is unity, you command a blessing. Thank you, Lord, for the Kenyan government. Thank you for the Italian government. Thank you for the organizers of this event and all that will be a part of this enriching 3 days of learning. We pray for the spirit of wisdom. We pray for the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Let's our time together, Lord. May the words of our mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing in your sight. Believing.
So thank you very much, Peter, for that wonderful prayer. It's my privilege now to welcome you all to our webinar today between the states of Kenya and Italy. My name is Alfred Murigi from the Department of Children's Services. The time now is 10:25 East African time, and I wish to introduce the Kenyan delegation. We are privileged today to have the Secretary, Children's Services, Mr. Shem Nyakutu, who is also the head of the Directorate of Children's Services with us today. I also wish to recognize the presence of Madam Karen Ogoti, Director and Head of Alternative Family Care Section. I also want to recognize the presence of Madam Roslyn Kabata, Advocate High Court of Kenya, representing the National Council for Administration of Justice. I also want to introduce section colleagues from Department of Children's Services, Alternative Family Care Section. I wish to introduce Madam Jane Munuhe. Secondly, Mr. Hudson Imbai. We also have Naomi Chule and David Range. These are officers that are based at the section within the Directorate of Children's Services. I also wish to recognize the presence of Department of Children's Services field officers. We have county children coordinators from 47 counties in the Republic of Kenya. I also want to recognize the presence of 30 managers from statutory children institutions in Kenya. These are children institutions that are government run. And distinguished guests and colleagues, that is the presence that we have from the Kenyan delegation. I wish to introduce Madam Kala to give us an introduction from the Italian side. Kala.
Good morning everybody. Welcome. A warm welcome to all the participants who are here with us in the boardroom, as well as all the participants who have joined online in Kenya and in Italy. My name is Carla Muscau, and all protocols observed. I'm the coordinator of the APRIRE program. APRIRE stands for Foster Care, Prevention, Rehabilitation and Reintegration for a Future to Vulnerable Children in Kenya. So I speak on behalf of the leading agency of the project, that is L'Albero della Vita, in English, the Tree of Life. For the Tree of Life, I participate together with my colleague Bonfas Okada Buluma, who will be among the moderators of the webinars. A few words of general introduction. The APRIRE project is a 3-year child protection program funded by the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation and implemented by a consortium of international and national organizations under the leadership of the Tree of Life and in strict partnership with several government Kenya departments. The program aims to promote the well-being and the protection of vulnerable children and families in Kenya by supporting the process of deinstitutionalization of the government through 3 main components: restorative justice, juvenile justice, and the promotion of alternative family care options with main focus on kinship and foster care. So this virtual exchange program on foster care is the result of a long journey, over 10 years of the Tree of Life and the partners in Kenya in the field of protection and in partnership with the DCS. As it's going to be widely explained throughout the government of Kenya has made care reform one of its priority, envisioning a country where children live happily and sustainably in families and communities. We fully embrace this vision. And it is within this framework that the program APRIRE project has facilitated a number of exchange opportunities between Italy and Kenya, with the aim of sharing experiences, good practices, and knowledge on foster care. So these webinars illustrate our determination to create this platform for learning from each other. And the 3 webinar sessions will provide an opportunity for government representatives, professionals in the field, to explore how to improve implementation of foster care services in different contexts. Very briefly, I'm going to say that each webinar will address a different angle of foster care. The first session, the one of today, will focus on the role of juvenile court and the link between juvenile justice and foster care. The second webinar, scheduled on Wednesday, will be mainly focused on analyzing and discussing government services to protect the welfare of children and foster care as a key option to protect a child and a young person in their best interest. while the third session, planned on Friday, 9th July, gives voice to organizations, representatives of civil society, private social services, and real experiences and real cases of lives in foster care. Thus, before handing over to our head of office of the Italian Cooperation, I would really like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank, on behalf of the Tree of Life and the entire Aprire project team, the Kenyan government, for having accepted us as a key partner, working so closely together for the same common goal. I therefore wish to thank the Department of Children's Services, the National Council for Children's Services, the National Council on the Administration of Justice, as well as the Probation and Aftercare, Kenya Prison, National Police, ODPP and Judiciary, just to mention some, for these continuous and diligent efforts dedicated to improve services and well-being of children in Kenya. Of course, this program would not have been possible without the support of the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, which since many years is funding development cooperation programs in Kenya, both in education and child protection. And a special thanks goes to the municipality of Milan, who has been a key partner in this flow of exchanges between the two countries. So now I don't want to take more time. Thank you very much, everyone. And I wish to introduce now Dr. Fabio Melloni, the head of office of the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, for his opening remarks. Thank you very much and welcome.
Invito e per questa videoconference che ho organizzato. Innanzitutto vorrei salutare i nostri ospiti. Maybe you prefer the speech in English. It is more easy because if you don't use the interpreter, maybe it's more easy for you if I switch to English. I don't know. Carla, what is the suggestion? Yeah. Okay. So I just first of all, I would like to say to appreciate the participation of our friends and the Kenyan authority. I see here was mentioned the Directorate of Children's Services in Kenya, and Shem Nyakutu, and then the Advocate of the High Court in Kenya, Rosalind Kabata, and also Noah Sangai, again the Director of Children's Service in Kenya. And I would also really appreciate the presence of our Italian friends and colleagues from the municipality of Milan, and Silvio Premoli, that is the guarantor of children's rights in the municipality of Milan, and the judge of the Children Courts of Brescia, the honorary judge of the Children Courts of Brescia, Marco Biali, and again the honorary judge of the Children Courts in Milan, Francesca Macci. I would like to see my appreciation that even in this difficult situation caused by the pandemic, the COVID, and the limitation caused by this epidemic, there is the possibility to keep to maintain the exchange of experience, the knowledge between Kenyan and Italy. That is a Tree of Life, the foundation, and the other Italian NGO like CEFA, and also the partnership with the Milan municipality. And again, is very important because, you know, COVID is affected a lot all over the world and Kenya, and the major effect is all for the vulnerability, for the people most vulnerable. And this project is addressing the most vulnerable in Kenya, and is a really, I think that your intervention is touched what is apparently is one of the major issues to give a hope to the most vulnerable, for young people in conflict with the law. And you know, the Italian cooperation here in Kenya is the president of the Italian cooperation is mostly addressed to support the agricultural, the environment, the small and medium enterprises, and the private sector. But we can do this even because there are a very, very strong presence of the Italian civil society that really is taking care of the basic services, the education service, the health service, and in this case, the minor that in conflict with the law, and again, giving them a possibility to study, to be educated, to also to get a job, also for the vocational training. And I think this activity really is something that will attach a great importance. And one other aspect that I would like to underline in this program is this strong relationship with the Italian experience and the Milan experience that I think is really something that give something more to the program. I would like to just introduce, and I also apologize that the ambassador could be not with us today, and he asked me to present his support to this program, to the activity that Albero della Vita, the Tree of Life, together with the as I said before, the presence of the Italian NGOs in the country, they are doing a really remarkable job. Thanks to invite me. Thanks for this opportunity. And really, I hope that this conference, this exchange of experience will be fruitful and could benefit for the Kenyan side, from Italian side too, and most important for the benefits of the children that are involved in the program. Thanks, and have a good job on these 3 days of your conference. Thanks again.
Director and Head of Alternative Family Care Section in Kenya. I wish also to recognize the presence of all heads of sections from the Directorate of Children's Services. So at this juncture, I wish to introduce Madam Karen, who will take us through her speech. So, Madam Karen.
Thank you, Mr. Murigi. I want to recognize Fabio Meloni, Head of Office of the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, Mr. Shem Nyakutu, and all participants present. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am standing in for the director, Mr. Noah Sanganyi, who was to take us through the opening speech before we invite Mr. Shem Nyakut to also give us his remarks. I will read what he was going to present. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me to express my appreciation to the organizers of this online webinar, which touches on the global shift of reducing reliance of residential care of children to the families and the community. Safeguarding and protection of the rights and welfare of children for national prosperity is guaranteed under the Children Act 2001. So in discharging the functions of the DCS, we make reference to the following: the international instruments, especially the UNCRC, the regional instruments, the ACRWC, that's the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of Children, the Kenyan Constitution of 2010, the Children's Act 2001, and other relevant statutes, which I will not mention here right now. We also have the policies, we have the guidelines and the regulations, and also the National Plan of Actions, which are drawn from the acts and the guidelines. Now, the department, through partnership with the various stakeholders, initiated the implementation of the guidelines for alternative family care of children in Kenya by starting a pilot program in Kisumu County in the year 2018. The initiative initially was spearheaded by the Department of Children's Services, that's under the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, and also UNICEF as one of the partners. But later on, other organizations who are relevant in this process came on board to support the care reform initiative, which was started in 2018. The organizations that joined forces to support the care reforms were as follows. One, we had UNICEF, the Maestro, the Hopes and Homes, Changing the Way We Care, the SOS, Lumos, FADV, and others like the Stahili Foundation. From the care reforms, we have strategic objectives which we want to achieve by the end of the process. And the main one is the development of policy, regulations, standards, and guidelines, which will guide in the implementation of this during the process. Establishment of leadership and coordination mechanisms. Lobby for increased resources so that we can now have enough resources to assist in the care reform process. Build evidence to support the benefits of the care reform, which will be able to show to anybody who wants to understand how we are doing it. There's also the strengthening of the prevention services for children, reintegration and expansion of family-based alternatives, support to caregivers, those who have gone through the process, especially those who have been in the institutions and they have now left. They are about the age of 18, and many of them are in independent living. Some have been able to stand on their own with the support of partners. The support to CCIs to transition. This is where we want children to move from the institutions, but in a very protective and a manner that is able to sustain these children in the community. So we support the CCIs to ensure that the transition is done gradually and gracefully. The engagement of the private sector. This is where we need a lot of support from the partners in the private sector. The government can also not do all this alone. Development of the social behavior change strategy. Now, in the care reform, we have gotten support that has enabled us to move forward. One, we have support from the legal and the policy framework which are in place, and these have made it easier for us to make reference to. There's also the government social protection programs like the cash transfer for the orphans and vulnerable children. This is also in our ministry under the social assistance unit. We have the support to the elderly and also those who are severely disabled. There is the guidelines for alternative family based care for children, which was developed in 2014. There is the national case management guidelines, which have already been developed, actually waiting for the launch. And we have very good political leadership and commitment to the effort. This is from the highest office in the country. We have very good will, and that's why this is moving fast. If it were not for the COVID-19, I'm sure we could have transitioned so many children to the community. There is the social protection programs, which is aimed at strengthening the family so that children can be retained in the community. So once we strengthen the families, we know that children will be able to stay in the community and get support. Our society partners are very active and very supportive. They have really supported the care reform process, especially since we started. And more so, before we started the process, we had a very strong initiative from the civil societies, and that's why I indicated earlier that we had so many partners who came on board for us to start the process. We got a lot of assistance. There is the religious leadership demonstrating commitment to care reforms, especially in our counties. We have so many religious organizations that are supporting the care reform. They want children to go back to the community, and those that are in the community to be retained in the community. There is increasing opportunities for funding support to care reform. A lot of resources are being redirected from the institutions to the community, and this is very encouraging, especially for a country that tells us that many children will be able to stay with the families. Even if it's not the biological parents, they will stay in the community, either with the guardians, or they'll be supported while they are in their households. We have very good community structures at all levels. Even the reporting systems are very good. From even the administration point of view, they are very strong, especially in the point of gatekeeping. The development of gatekeeping mechanisms to prevent children going to formal care is also very strong. We want to ensure that children do not go to the institutions, but they are assisted while they are in the community. So our gatekeeping mechanism is also very strong to prevent these children from moving out of the community. We have very good linkages with other programs. Like I mentioned, the OVC program. We have even some of the NHIF support programs for those who need the health care support. We have those who are in the living with the elderly, they are being supported. And even those who are children but severely disabled. We have such programs and many others, which I may not mention right now. Now, we have a focus on our care reform, which I'll just briefly mention, that there is the coordination of care reform that at the national and county level, this will assist in ensuring that the process is managed very well at all levels. We even have the sub-county level. So it goes down to the lowest level, and the support at those levels is very encouraging, especially from the administrations. Building evidence of promising practices for care reform is also our focus, that we want to talk about the cases that have been successful in this process, so that even when we do best practices, we are able to learn and understand what is happening in each county and even in the sub-county, to the individual households where our children, especially those who have transitioned from the CCIs to the community. And CCIs, I mean the charitable children institutions. We are also focusing on forging strong collaboration with the key actors, which I mentioned earlier that our key actors are very active, but still we want to ensure that the collaboration is very important. And as a country, we encourage public partnership. That is one of our agenda, So this is why our focus is to ensure that all the key actors are on board. There is the strengthening of the social workforce. We have also trained some social workers who will be involved in this process, and they are the implementers, especially at the lowest level. And they are the ones who are in touch with these children. Finally, on this focus, we also have the gatekeeping mechanism, which we want to ensure that it is strong to make sure that the children are protected from moving to the CCIs. Finally, I would say something on the achievement since 2018, that we have done a lot, but I'll just briefly mention on the documents that we've mentioned, which are, we've developed, which are going to guide us in the implementation of the care reform. One, we have a development of a care reform strategy that is being spearheaded by the National Council for Children's Services. That is the organization or the agency that develops documents as a policy they're the ones who are in charge of policy development. So this document is almost at the end of being finalized, and very soon we will have the launch, which will now enable us to make reference to this document. We also have the development of a case management for integration package. We have finalized that. This will help the social workers to understand how they can manage cases individually, and also reintegrate children following a very standard way of reintegration. There's also the development of the training manual for alternative care and the practitioner as user-friendly handbook, which is also ready for training. And there's the development of the gatekeeping guidelines. We have established establishment and strengthening of community structures. We are trying to ensure that these structures are in place and ready for the implementation. Development of a caseworkers toolkit. Tools are designed to be the first step in collecting and analyzing information that can be used to inform further assessments. Development of monitoring and evaluation frameworks. So the program interventions and action planning are part of these toolkits that we'll be using. To conclude, I want to thank FADV for the commitment and the visibility in this care reform journey, and for conducting a pilot on foster care in Nairobi and Nakuru County, where they have picked, especially in Nakuru, of some of the counties like Kasarani, and we are seeing fruits that will finally help us. In Nakuru, I know they are in the whole county. We also, also a few sub-counties, and we expect to learn a lot from the deliberations ahead, and also pick up all the best and promising practices that will be shared in the 3-day online webinar. Thank you so much for listening to me. I now wish to take this opportunity to invite the Secretary or the Director of Children's Services to give his remarks. Welcome, Mr. Shem Yakut.
Thank you very much. Honorable Fabio Meloni, Head of Office, Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, distinguished guests in Kenya and Italy, all participants, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am delighted to join you for this 3-day webinar exchange on foster care program between Kenya and Italy. Let me acknowledge that the government of Kenya, through the Directorate of Children's Services, has put in place mechanisms geared towards retaining children in their families and communities. In Kenya, the family remains the ideal place in which to raise a child. retraining children in their communities, give them identity, sense of belonging, and helps them benefit from the support networks within the community. Family care equips children with life skills to interact and face life challenges. The government of Kenya, through the Directorate of Children's Services, has made care reforms one of its priorities, envisioning a country where children live safely, happily, and sustainably in families and communities that serve their best interests. This also complements the ongoing process of reviewing the Children's Act 2001. The Directorate of Children's Services, jointly with the FADV, is currently undertaking a pilot program on foster care. The pilot is in 2 counties, the pilot program, that is Nairobi and Nakuru. Kenya has developed a care reform strategy for children to provide on how them transition care of children from residential care to family. So what I'm saying is that there is a strategy for transitioning children from residential care to family and community care. Let me also state that this exchange program started with the visit of officials from Cattolica University from Milan last year and was to culminate with a visit to Italy by Kenya government officials. However, due to the global pandemic that is COVID-19, this was not realized. The pandemic situation also necessitated the development of innovative approaches, such as this online webinar, where now we can have meetings, we can have trainings online, that we don't have to meet one-on-one. Therefore, the 3-day online webinar sessions will provide opportunities for government officials, child care practitioners in the 2 countries, and to adopt promising practices which will enhance service delivery. On behalf of the Directorate of Kenya Services, of Children's Services, I want to thank the organizers of this webinar and wish you all fruitful deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, our secretary, for the very important and comments that you've made in your speech, and our director, Madam Karen. Allow me also, Bwana Secretary, to recognize the presence of National Council for Children's Services personnel, headed by their CEO, Mr. Abdinur Sheikh, and the 10 officers who are actually with us in this particular webinar. So NSSF staff, kindly join us and feel welcomed. At this juncture, I want to pass over the mic to Carla to give us the way forward on our next presenter. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody for the very interesting and important contributions. And allow me to acknowledge the huge, important progress that the government of Kenya has made in few years. They've mentioned that the care reform started in 2018. We are now in 2021, and in 3 years, so many things have been done that have been mentioned during our previous remarks. So we are really glad and privileged to be part of this journey, and much more will be done ahead of us. I wish now to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Silvio Premoli, the guarantor of children's rights in Italy. garante dei diritti dei minori. Welcome, Mr. Premoli. Oh.
Sorry, we can't hear you, sir. I think we can't hear you.
Può accendere il microfono? To leave the meeting, okay. Maybe we need to explain. Yeah, but can he hear me? Because that's the point. Professor Premoli dovrebbe uscire e rientrare nel meeting, so he has to leave and join again with the same link. Quindi con lo stesso link uscire e rientrare. He's back.
Mi sentite? Ok, mi sembra di capire un po' in ritardo, ma mi sentite. Bene, sono contento di essere qui per questo scambio tra due paesi come i nostri, con l'intento comune di realizzare i diritti dei bambini e delle bambine.
Children's right, children, boys and girls, and of course to carry further so that we can protect their interest at the utmost of our efforts. Personally, this has always been, I would say, my major goal. This is one I've been engaged with ever since I started to work. I'm the guarantor of children and teenagers' rights for the municipality of Milan. I am a volunteer, and my key professional role actually is that I do teach pedagogy at the University Cattolica in Milan that has been mentioned not long ago this morning. So my resume, my professional background also includes my engagement with taking care of children, teenagers, those who are experiencing troubles and problems, living either in the streets or mistreated and abused children that are welcome in residential care. My personal life, I've always been a foster parent. I've been part of a foster family program. So I've experienced that not only from a professional standpoint as a pedagogist, but also I've been part of a foster family. And we have welcomed an African teenager, although she was born in Italy. So actually, I'd love to share my slides. Now, I'm not controlling the slides to say if somebody can actually show slide number 1 now to me, please.
Ok.
Okay, thank you.
Utilizzerò la prima parte del mio intervento.
So the first part of my speech means to share with you the theory. And I apologize for that, but as a university professor, I do rely on theory so that I can explain exactly what do I do in my role as a guarantor and what do I do as a citizen and how meaningful I am dealing with children and teenage protection rights protection. And at the same time, I was already a professor and I was already training professionals also. But I realized some 10 years ago, I realized that both in Italy and elsewhere in Europe, there were some recurring elements in the childcare approach. Well, as you know, European countries are all diverse and different from one another. We all have very long and diverse histories. We do have different legislations in force throughout Europe. But actually, I have to say that over the years, we were observing some recurring items. And these recurring items perhaps were being emphasized because the EU started to allow a greater exchange of people all over the territory to take place. But also, let's say that that was happening thanks to the influence of the Convention of the Rights of the Child, dated 1989, which was ratified in Italy in 1991. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm sure you're all familiar with the convention, so I will not spend too much words on that. I'd love to make some comments around what happened in Italy. So we ratified the convention in Italy in 1991, and then we really translate this convention into reality, well, on top of becoming part of our legislation. Well, in 1997, through Law 285 and partially 451, we're actually adopting some tangible policies so to protect the rights of children and teenagers, and so to transform the whole of the underlying culture. And actually, Law 285 is providing with a number of operational guidelines.
Sorry, can I explain to the people saying who they have not been able to switch to Italian? So to English rather. So there is interpretation. So you need to go to the globe button at the bottom of your screen, click, choose English. And then after choose English, you mute original language. You'll find interpretation there. I'm repeating again. So at the bottom of your screen, there is a globe button. Switch, click and select English. And then make sure you also click mute original language. After that, you will find English interpretation there. There is English interpretation. I'm getting lots of messages. It's in Italian. So you need to switch off. Okay, now please give me a thumbs up if you've managed to get that. I have a lot of messages. I've seen all of them. But please just give me a thumbs up. Thank you. You guys are amazing. Now we can continue the presentation.
Ok, possiamo andare alla slide numero 5.
So may we jump to slide number 5, please. So, as I was saying, Law 285 is actually making possible for some guidelines to be adopted in the matter of protection of children's rights. And in that same year, we are actually passing another important law, another important piece of legislation. So we haven't really finished in Italy. There's such a long way to go when it comes to define guidelines and policies. And we're still struggling in some regions in Italy, as regions are owners of data, and there's no national database. So it's very difficult to understand what's going on in every single region when children are being welcomed by foster care, residential care units, and so on. So back to what I was saying before, back to those recurring items that we started to emphasize all over Europe. Well, these recurring items have to do with the ratification ratification of the convention. Well, that convention is very much triggering, entailing a paradigm shift, a shift in culture when it comes to protect the rights of children and teenagers. And actually, that same convention, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, is allowing countries to understand that there are so many common goals that they're sharing all together. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they all have to execute all the same, but it certainly means that things are now being tackled finally, I would say, all over Europe. So if you look at the convention, first of all, you see children's rights-based approach. This is becoming increasingly powerful. And this means that we are more and more devoted to take care of our minor, of our children, always bearing in mind that we want to keep the family unified, united, not only to protect the rights of the child, but also working for and in favor of the integrity of the family of the child. Of course, unless actions taken by parents have been so bad and have been so abusive, then of course the approach will be different. And then you see all the other approaches underneath, so approach based on family integrity, which I mentioned, based on resilience, research and strength and beauty, and based on participation of the enhancement of the point of view of children. So listening to their voices, listen to children's voices. There's also another approach, which is oriented to build a single professional point of view, because often many professionals are being engaged and not all of them are working towards the same goals. And there might be, let's say, there's a lack of compliance, there's a lack of consistency on that. And there's also an important intercultural approach, which is paying attention to the differences from a religious, ethnicity point of view that might be emphasized in families. Overall, there's a greater attention being paid towards the improvement of the quality of the intervention and actions being taken forward. Now, all of these approaches haven't been implemented all throughout, but they're becoming more and more important and powerful. Next slide, please. So the convention, because it has become so central, now it is let's say, entailing a number of policies all over Europe. Now, if you consider what is happening all around the world, many countries all around the world are now experiencing multicultural societies. If you have a single piece of legislation that has been ratified all over the world, well, that of course allows us to build upon foundations so that all the projects can be implemented throughout. And this is not so much a top-bottom approach, a top-down approach, but this is something that has been created and established during the 80s by all the countries that have contributed to the layout, to the drafting of such convention. And actually, it is not a top-down approach, but it is something that can be welcomed and ratified by all the countries, as we know, with very few exceptions. Next slide. Actually, I'd love to summarize now. I'd love to speed up until slide 13, 1-3. Slide 13, please. Slide 13. Okay. Thank you. So after my preliminary remarks, so speaking through the importance of the convention, also I would like to add that in my stories, in my professional story as a researcher of rights protection for children and teenagers, well, I have realized that adopting an approach that is based on the rights of children, so really focusing on a brand new perspective that does not just consider the need of the child as something that I may, as a professional, respond to from a state standpoint, but actually, whenever I see that their very need is being denied, I do transform my perspective and I try to adopt a brand new approach. And that approach invites me to respond to that need be denied, because we cannot allow any citizens not to be treated in a fair manner and not seeing their rights to be fulfilled. And now, this is the very key perspective that I want to get across, and that is the key perspective that I had at the moment I took on this role. So I became a guarantor. My role is an institutional, independent role. I do focus not only, but mainly on the rights of children and teenagers. And I may rely upon financial and human resources to help me out. We don't specifically have a budget on a yearly basis, but let's say that there's an office with Garanta who's not being paid any salary, so works on a voluntary basis. But actually, I do rely upon two full-time equivalent from the municipality working in my support. And then, of course, I may establish a number of projects so that my activity can be allowed. Now, such resources are not in place, but over the next 3 years, starting from the end of this year, they will be in place. This is just for sake of example, of course. So, as a citizen, guarantor, well, that is not foreseen by the national legislation, actually, but we do have a piece of legislation in Italy saying that we can have a national guarantor for the protection of rights of children and teenagers, and through that same law, we may actually have a guarantor for each and every region nationwide in Italy. When it comes to the guarantor of the municipality of Milan, actually that comes from a municipality decision that has been taken. So my role is actually being defined by the municipality, and because I've been appointed, I haven't been appointed as a regional or as a national guarantor. Let's say I do have limited powers when it comes to the city of Milan only. And that very power has to do with moral suasion, advocacy, attention being paid to certain scenarios that haven't been adequately tackled. And of course, I do interact with many other offices within the municipality of Milan. For instance, I can speak to those councillors dealing with education, dealing with protection of minor and social policies, but not only, actually, not only, because I may speak to urban planners and also to head of transport division, because whenever children are being involved and things are not happening quite properly, in my role, I can emphasize that. And of course, I may perhaps try to modify those decisions which are not fulfilling the rights of children. The guarantor in Milan, within the municipality of Milan, when welcoming red alarms perhaps being raised by families, trainers, teachers, and so on. And ever since I've been a Garanta, so I've been appointed in my role end of July 2020, I have to say that in one case only, we were coming across two teenagers, 16 years of age, who have spoken to me directly. But the other, let's say, all of the other cases have been raised by grown-ups, by adults, of course, whenever children's rights were not being fulfilled. So what happens? I do listen. I do have an active listening. And then basically I do speak to all the relevant offices that are supposed to take care of those scenarios more specifically, so that the problem is being fixed. But it's not that I take on the charge of all that. I do listen. I do try to meet up with people as much as possible. Well, we've experienced COVID-19, so often we have met online because unfortunately we could not meet in person. But I have to say that basically what I try to do, I do listen, I do pay attention, and then I do rely upon the relevant division, the relevant people, so that the problem is being taken care of course. I have to say that I'm happy of the great collaboration that is currently ongoing with the municipality, with Milan schools and other associations all over the city. We have been able over the last year, perhaps not really to fix the problem, but definitely to improve the situation. We may go to my next slide now, I think. Well, it's not my next slide, sorry. My next slide, which is not the last. And then we can switch to the next. The speaker is asking to switch to the next. So some pieces of legislation were mentioned on the prior slides, and this is the final slide summarizing what I have been spoken through. So what is it that I want to get across here? When it comes to my role, the guarantor of the citizens, I'd love perhaps to provide you with some updates on the type of interpretation of my very role, which we are now building, and which we have built over the last 12 months. As I said, I've been appointed less than a year or so. So as a guarantor, I will be appointed in my role for the next 4 years, so 5 years in total. And I believe that the most important item, considering that, of course, my main role is to promote knowledge around the rights of children and teenagers, and supervisory and monitoring on rights fulfillment within the municipality and within the metropolitan city of Milan. But still, the one thing that should be duly emphasized, that is something that I had in mind already, but it has become even stronger through the past months. So for me to really being able to conduct my role is to give as much room as possible, as much voice as possible to the children themselves, and get them on board when it comes to design and project the tasks of my office. I have to say that over the past few months, we've been talking with lots of grown-ups, covering many important institutional roles within the city, the president of the judicial court, of minor judicial court, juvenile court, and lots of other institutions. But also we have tried to speak directly with children and teenagers, because those are indeed Those are indeed the people we want to talk to. And also, we have created a team of teenagers, usually aged between 14 and 18. Some of these teenagers have been elected by their classmates to speak on their behalf on school subjects. But actually, we were talking to them also because we understood that we can learn a lot from what is going on in schools also. And then, of course, we started to speak to some different scenarios, dealing with and tackling the scenarios of younger children aged between 8 and 13. And we have tried, of course, to speak to all the different stakeholders. And then we also spoke to the teenagers from Agevolando, the very first Italian association of care leavers. So those who are leaving the residential care, and they are perhaps now on their behalf, in their turn, now looking after children and teenagers experiencing the same scenario that they have experienced in the past. So this is all we've done so far. So after speaking to many of these children, teenagers, we've decided not so much to create a single project around what's going on over the next 4 years, but instead we have decided to create some context and define some social get-together so that the guarantor can meet up with teenagers. Starting from September, we will have a roundtable with children and teenagers who will speak to me on a regular basis, reporting to me what's going on in the city so that I may monitor and tackle firsthand what's going on in the city. And this is for sure becoming the crucial activity in my office. Of course, I will also take care of all of my other tasks, but in this particular sense, I will rely upon this direct support from children and teenagers. Okay, I may stop here now. I think I've shared all I wanted to. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much for that presentation, our Professor Silvio Primoli. And at this juncture, before I introduce our next speaker from Kenya, I wish to recognize the presence of the National Council for Children's Services, who have joined this webinar with us today, led by their CEO, Mr. Abdinur Sheikh, and the entire team. At this juncture, I want to introduce Madam Roslyn Kabata. She's an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and also representing the National Council for Administration of Justice. Madam Roslyn is standing in for Justice Teresia Madheka, and I wish to call upon Madam Kabata to give her presentation. So Roslyn, if you can hear me.
mainly has judicial authority. And we say that judicial authority is derived from the people and vests in the people, but it is exercised by the courts and tribunals as established by the Constitution. So that's why we see that most matters of public interest are held in high regard by the court, and they're heard expeditiously. The judiciary is guided by certain principles that guide the decisions by the judges and magistrates or judicial officers, especially in the tribunals and subordinate courts. And we know that justice should be done irrespective of status. Justice should not be delayed, and that's why we say that justice delayed is denied. Alternative forms of dispute resolution mechanisms are promoted in the Kenyan judiciary, and this is where we see that mediation is promoted. We also have plea bargaining and diversion for children matters, which are promoted as well. And there's also a committee that was established on alternative justice systems to see if alternative forms of dispute resolution mechanisms can be used to dispense of cases. And some of these cases, we say that they should not be handled by alternative dispute resolution mechanisms such as sexual offenses. So those have to go to court. Another principle that is followed by the judiciary is that justice shall be delivered without undue regard to procedural technicalities, and that the purpose of the principles of the Constitution should be protected. So anytime that a judicial officer is making a decision, those are the principles that they are supposed to abide by according to the Constitution, and all judicial officers are bound by these principles. So what is the structure of our judiciary in Kenya? One, the judiciary is headed by the Chief Justice, and the Chief Justice is the president of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is the highest court in Kenya. And after that, we have the Court of Appeal, we have the High Court, and then we have the subordinate courts and tribunals that follow. So right now, the Chief Justice is Honorable Lady Justice Martha Koome. She's the first female Chief Justice in Kenya. And she was also the chairperson of the NCHA Special Task Force on Children Matters. Now we can happily report that she's the chairperson of the National Council on the Administration of Justice as a whole. And that's how she coordinates all the justice actors in Kenya. I'd like to note that subordinate courts also include the magistrates' courts, court-martial, and the Kadhi's courts. So magistrates' courts are divided into various hierarchies. There's the resident magistrates' courts, the principal magistrates' courts, and others. And the court-martial mostly hears matters or issues regarding armed forces. So they don't go to the normal courts, they go to the court-martial. And then we have the Kadhi's court, which hears matters involving the Islamic religion. So another thing I was supposed to talk about was the children court. And I'll give an introduction. We only have 2 gazetted children courts in the country, unfortunately, but we hope that this will change. And they are established in compliance with the Convention of the Rights of the Child and the Constitution and the Children Act. And we note that the Constitution of Kenya notes that a child is any human being under the age of 18 years. The Children Court is established by the Children Act, Section 73, to handle cases involving children. Some of the cases that these courts handle include civil matters and criminal matters. We note that we don't call children criminals. They are children in conflict with the law. So if there's only 2 children courts in Kenya, we have some courts which have taken the initiative to have a separated court or a designated court to hear children matters. So some of the civil matters that are heard in the children court involve cases of parental responsibility, custody and maintenance, order for the protection of children, or matters of children in need of care and protection, which is under Section 119 of the Children Act. So children who are charged, yes?
Rosaline,
Yes?
just mute. The people are saying that they can't hear you, but for us, we can hear you properly. So I'm just wondering.
Okay. Okay, let me know when I should continue.
Okay, I don't know. Can you hear her now? Rosaline, can you speak?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we don't know about the people on the other side.
Okay.
If you can hear, just give us thumbs up. Okay, you can go on, Rosaline.
Okay, thank you, Jenny.
Oh, yeah, they just said it in the Italian. Okay, you have to switch off the translation and go back to original sound. So you're still in the Italian channel. If you can't hear Rosaline, it's because you're still in the Italian channel. Please, what's her name, the interpreter? Tell them to go back to, Christina, tell them to go back to English, because they're still in Italian. So you have to go back. You have to go back to English channel for you to hear Rosaline, because I think those who can't hear, they're still in the Italian channel. And if you can hear me, please can I see thumbs up. Christina, please kick them out from your channel. Tell them to go back to English. Yes. Yeah. To remind every time we're going back. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. On.
Okay. Jenny, should I continue?
Proceed, Rosaline.
Okay, thank you. All right. So we were at matters handled by the Children Court. One, I mentioned that the Children Court handles civil matters. And two, it handles hearings or matters of children in conflict with the law. And where a child is charged together with a person or persons above the age of 18, because some of the children commit crimes with adults, then the children is judged by an ordinary criminal court, that's the High Court. And we note that the courts, or the High Court where the child is heard, they usually take into account the best interest of the child, and note that they are placed in the relevant rehabilitation centers after that, or a Boston institution. So there are some statutory conditions that the court is supposed to adhere to, and they are stipulated in the Children Act. And Section 74 of the Children Act stipulates that all children courts should sit in different rooms or a building from other courts. This is something we are seeking to achieve. Not all courts have done this, but some of the courts make sure that they have mechanisms in which they make it conducive for the child to be heard, such as clearing the court so that the child can feel comfortable to testify in cases where they are child victim. There are children magistrates that have been appointed by the Chief Justice to preside over courts in most parts of the country to deal with children. But we note that in Kenya, all magistrates have been gazetted to be children magistrates. That means that all magistrates can hear matters involving children, even if there are only 2 gazetted children courts. All magistrates can hear children cases. So that this means that children can access justice in whichever court, and any matter involving a child can be filed in any of the magistrates' courts, which are the majority in Kenya. So what is the relationship between the child justice system and foster care? The child justice system can be defined as a formal, responsive arrangement by the government to process and deal with a child in accordance with the prescribed set of laws, while taking cognizance of the child's rights and best interest. So as you can see, the keywords here is a formal, responsive arrangement, and there's a process to deal with the child, and they take cognizance, or they recognize, the child's rights and best interest. So the child justice system presumes a systematic, organic arrangement of government agencies that are dependent upon each other, yet operating distinctly but having a shared objective: addressing delinquency in prevention of crime. So if we take this into account, that there are children in different categories in the justice system, there are children in need of care and protection, there are child victims, child witnesses, and we have children in conflict with the law. In the Kenyan child justice system, we note that there are many various agencies that deal with children. This composed of probation officers, we have police officers, we have the Department of Children's Services, we have the judiciary, we have the police, we have the lawyers as well, and the CSOs which are involved. But we assume that all of these agencies work in a very systematic and organic arrangement to make sure that children access justice, or their best interest and rights are being fulfilled. So how have we done this as Kenya? Kenya has a chain link, or a council that coordinates an efficient and effective justice system. The NCAJ, which I introduced myself to represent, it stands for the National Council on the Administration of Justice. It is established under Section 34 of the Judicial Service Act, and its mandate is to ensure a coordinated, efficient, effective, and consultative approach in the administration of justice and reform in the justice system. So NCAJ brings together the heads of the justice system. It is chaired by the Chief Justice. The Director of Public Prosecution also sits there. We have the Inspector General who also sits there. Basically, the heads of the justice system sit at the National Council. And what we do is that the National Council is reflected or mirrors on the ground through task forces and committees. And one of the task forces there that was gazetted in 2016 is the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters, which only deals with children matters. So other committees include the Bail and Bond, we have the Sexual Offences, and we have the National Committee on Criminal Justice Reforms, which look into other issues, but the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters looks into children matters only. So what is the role of the council? One, it formulates policies relating to administration of justice. It implements, monitors, and evaluates and reviews strategies in the administration of justice. It facilitates the establishment of court user committees at the county level and mobilizes resources and for purposes of efficient administration of justice. So court user committees are what we have in all the courts in the country, and they have membership of all the justice agencies sitting together to make sure that they find the gaps, the challenges, and they resolve them together. NCAJ noted that the issues in the justice system are not occasioned by one agency. So that's where all the agencies have to sit together to make sure that they come up with solutions specific to their courts, that are unique to their courts, and that are fulfill the rights of the child, the best interests of the child, or cater to their needs themselves as a court. So foster care is the placement of a child with a person who is not the child's parent, relative, or guardian, and who is willing to undertake the care and maintenance of this child. So those ingredients have to be fulfilled and noted so that the child is not placed with a child's parent, relative, or guardian. Then it will not be termed as foster care. Foster care can be through a court order or involvement of an authority. And in Kenya, we note that this is the Department of Children's Services. And we note that the greatest merit of foster care is that children are able to remain in a family environment and they are not put in an institution, which is what Kenya is trying to move away from. So one of the connections between the judiciary and foster care is the involvement of an institution and a care order. Section 147 of the Children Act notes that where a child by virtue of a care order has been committed to a rehabilitation school or to a charitable children institution, the director in conjunction with the manager of the institution may place the child with a foster parent for such period as the director may from time to time authorize, provided that the child in relation to whom a care order has been made by reason of being found guilty of a criminal offense shall not be placed with a foster parent without leave of the court. So here we can see that there has to be a relationship between the judiciary and the director of children's services to make sure that the child is placed with a foster parent by virtue of having orders, and orders emanate from the court originally. So here I've noted the bodies and their mandates under the Children Act. Mostly it's the Department of Children's Services, which has the mandate to safeguard the welfare of children in foster care, placement of the child, supervising. The managers of the institutions have the duty to supervise and assess the condition of the child under foster care, and this can be done through the Department of Children's Services as well. To receive requests for arrangements between the foster care parents and parents or guardians of the child, to stipulate amounts payable for maintenance or enforce maintenance orders as noted. So the DCS is also supposed to maintain a database of foster placements in Kenya. And also make an arrangement. They can also facilitate that engagement between a foster parent and a parent on how the child should be taken care of. There's that consideration of the religious and cultural background of the child when placing a child in foster care. So ways in which the court facilitates alternative care for children are: one, it ensures that the best interests of the child are protected in all matters. So if there's a case that is filed in court to hear any case of any matter involving this child who is going to be taken into foster care, then the court ensures that the best interest of the child is protected. The court also has the duty to receive cases involving children through the civil procedure. It can also revoke committal orders upon application by the director or its own motion. It has power to call for records and reports from officers, which is oral or written. It can call for experts and reports from officers. It can order legal representation of the child. It grants leave to the Department of Children's Services to place the child found guilty of committing a crime to foster care. It grants leave to a foster parent to live with the child outside Kenya's jurisdiction. So a foster parent cannot live with a child outside Kenya's jurisdiction without a court order. It imposes obligations and conditions on foster care on who travels the child outside Kenya. So even if that order is given, the court can give conditions. It hears matters relating to any part of the act, whether contravened by any person, to compel or make them do something to make sure that they are protecting the child. And it also hears disputes arising or matters arising affecting the child under foster care. It can also extend parental responsibility past 18 years. The court is also involved in giving orders for permanent alternative care of the child if the duration of foster care has passed. So we can see that the court is involved in this process mostly, and it also gives orders such as a production order, an access order, an exclusion order, or wardship order. And these orders relate to different aspects of the child. Like a production order is to make sure that the child is presented if there's any issue or if the court deems fit. An access order is where it gives an order where a child can be seen or visited. An exclusion order is where they want to make sure that there's a person who should not come close to the child or be in contact with the child. A wardship order is where the child is placed under the care of the court. So there's various aspects or principles that a court should take into account when making decisions. I talked about the principles in the Constitution, but there are also principles in the Children Act that should be adhered to when making orders regarding a child. One is to make sure that they ascertain the feelings and wishes of the child concerned. Two will be the physical, emotional, and education needs, especially where a child has a disability. Three is the likely effect on the child. So when placing a child in foster care, what is the likely effect to this child? The other would be age, sex, religious, persuasion, and cultural background. The other one would be any harm to the child. If the child has suffered something like a risk, if they're being abused, that should be taken into account. The ability of the parent to provide, customs and practices of the community in which the child belongs, the child's exposure to use of drugs and psychotropic substances is also one of the considerations that the court must make sure that it considers before placing a child into foster care. So yes, the judiciary is involved in foster care in all those aspects. And this relates mostly to the Department of Children's Services, making sure that they place the child, and also the responsibilities of the foster parent to the child. But there are also checks that can be made by the court against the Department of Children's Services. And these mostly are made so that they can make sure that we protect the rights of the child and that the best interests of the child are taken into account. So we have something called judicial review and administrative actions against public bodies. And one can be what we call mandamus, as it sounds. It sounds like something mandatory. That's where the word comes from. So mandamus is the power of a superior court to order a lower court or government agent to perform a mandatory duty correctly. So if we find that the Department of Children's Services did not make an order the way it's supposed to, or a foster parent or a parent or guardian comes to court, the court can compel the Department of Children's Services to perform their duty in a correct way or to perform their duty totally. Number two is prohibition, an order of prohibition. And this is an order that exactly as it says, it just prohibits the performance of certain duties. So an example could be that maybe the parent of the child has been found, but there's also an order, a care order, or our child is being placed into foster care, which would be an alternative care. So if the parents have already been found, but the department or the children officer is placing the child with a foster parent, someone can go to court and ask for prohibition orders. So this is what we call a prohibition order. The other would be certiorari. And this order is made to quash an order of a public body or officer when the decision is not fair or just, where it is unreasonable or did not go through due process. So someone can, even if the children officer or the director of children's services has made an order, someone can go to court to quash that order. So those are the three remedies that are available to the public against the government to make sure that children are protected. And that's where the judiciary also comes in. So the court also facilitates permanency in alternative care, where we note that if an adoption order is made, then it quashes the care order for a child who is placed under foster care. So the adoption process also involves the court, and this is how court facilitates permanency in alternative care. So because foster care is, of course, a temporary arrangement, and we want to see that children are in a more permanent and stable environment. Yes. So what are the reforms to improve safety of children? There are very many, but I'll just mention a few that relate to what we are talking about today. And one is establishment of the children court user committees to ensure that children issues are a standing agenda for all court users. So we find that the connection between the community and the court is through the court user committees, where we have all the actors in the justice system are represented. We have the religious leaders who are part of the court user committees. And we note that NCHA has established children court user committees, which are specific to children to discuss children issues. Number two would be that November in the judiciary calendar has been set aside for the Children National Service Month as a Children National Service Month, to make sure that we hear children cases and children cases are prioritized. So this is what we do during that period, and we are able to make sure that all children cases are, especially the ones that are past 6 months, are cleared. So repealing of the Children Act is still in the process. The NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters was part of the National Steering Committee that was involved in the process of repealing. And the bill now is in Parliament, and we hope that it will pass this year. We've done a lot of lobbying with members of Parliament on this bill because it has taken into account emerging issues and would be aligned to the Constitution of Kenya 2010, and we hope that it will be passed. Establishment of the NCAJ is also a reform because it takes into account all the child justice actors or the justice actors to make sure that we have well-trained officers who are sensitive to the needs of children, and we do this through training and sensitization. So there's also the use of a protection and care form that was developed by the NCAJ Special Task Force on Children Matters. And what this protection and care form does is to make sure that we record information of children in need of care and protection. In the past, before this form was developed, there was no form to present a child in court except a charge sheet. So you'd find that a child who has not committed a crime is presented to court using a charge sheet. And a charge sheet basically is a document that shows that you committed a crime, and it is used to bring you to court or to show you what crimes you are charged with. That's why it's called a charge sheet. So a protection and care form was premised on Section 119 of the Children Act, and it identifies all those children who are in need of care and protection. And after that, a protection and care file is opened. It is off-white in color so that the magistrates can recognize that this is a children matter. Another thing that is still being developed is the Juvenile Justice Information Management System. We call it the JJIMS, and it is a system that would be used to collect data on children in the justice system. We have the CPIMS, but it only recognizes children who are in need of care and protection, and we hope that we can work together to make sure that children who are in conflict with the law are also included in the system. The task force is also drafting the children court protocol and revising the through care guidelines. And the protocol will highlight the duties of the court and how the court is supposed to handle children matters in terms of what the court is supposed to look in terms of infrastructure, what data is the court supposed to collect, how is the court supposed to carry out proceedings in the courtroom. And all the revision of the through care guidelines. Through care guidelines are just standard operating procedures for children officers or officers who handle children in the justice system, just to tell them how they're supposed to make sure that they handle children. I hope this information has been useful. So that is how the justice system links to foster care, and we hope that everything is going to fall into place, and we make sure that children are in alternative care instead of institutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roslyn, for that very good presentation. From the chat box, you can see a lot of comments from colleagues who are with us in this webinar. And thanks so much for that presentation. So colleagues, we are reminding you that for those who have questions or comments, kindly channel them through the chat box, because that's how this system has been designed. We cannot communicate directly.
Sorry, I thought it was taking. Yes, I think you can hear me now. Now, I was saying, before moving to the next presentation, I would also like to encourage questions and comments. Please feel free to share in the chat so that after the next presentation, we can certainly have our debate and question and answers. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Marco Ubiali for the next presentation. Welcome. Jenny, anything to remind about the languages? You can now switch to Italian. Marco, un attimo.
I am the honorary judge in the Children's Courts of Milan. Priorly, I used to work for the Children's Courts in Brescia, region of Lombardy. Actually, my speech is anticipated Mrs. Maci's presentation, and she'll be tackling foster care. I will be sharing with you what do we do at the juvenile court in Milan. So it is, of course, a specialized institution to manage justice. Well, first of all, it was established in 1944, so it's very close to its 90 years of life. But the law that disciplines is still dating back to those years. So it is composed of 4 magistrates, 2 professional magistrates, so graduate in law school, and 2 honorary judges, 1 man and 1 woman. These 2 are both experts when it comes to psychology, social services, pedagogy, and they contribute through their expertise to the creation of this body, of the institutional judiciary body. And with the exception of few cases, which I will mention shortly, all of decisions that are being taken in a collegial manner. So the power of the honorary judge is exactly the same as the formal magistrate. From an organization standpoint, we do have a territorial jurisdiction. In Italy, we do have 29 juvenile courts made up of 800 magistrates, of which 600 are honorary judges. So what do we do? What do we deal with? Where we deal mainly with the 3 areas, criminal, civil, and admin. Let me start from the criminal section. So the juvenile court has to do with crimes being committed by children aged 14 and 18. Below 14 years of age, the child cannot go to court. So the minor cannot have any measures, let's say criminal measures. In the event a crime is committed, there will either be a civil or admin measure being taken against him. So there are, let's say, 4 stages, which are the same as grown-ups: preliminary investigations, preliminary hearing, debate, and execution. Now, there is a law that dates back to 1988, which is disciplining the entire criminal journey for minor, with the underlying philosophy. Well, the possibility for minors actually is to, let's say, to recover their normal life as soon as possible and avoiding relapses, so that no more crimes will be committed once the measures have been taken. So back to the 4 stages, preliminary investigations. In this case, we do have a single judge taking action when it comes to preliminary investigations to confirm either the measure or to take the child over to police station, or let's say there might be some decisions which are being made. Perhaps the child, it will be compulsory for the child to do to conduct certain activities, or else he will be taken to an institution. Or in the event charges are very severe, the crime is a very bad crime, then in that case, of course, the child might also be taken to a minor prison. So the judge for preliminary investigations can also, let's say, either dismiss or extend. he may also decide to actually close the proceedings in the event he does not find the crime relevant. And of course, when the crime, the charge is very mild, in that particular case, it might be considered as an occasional thing that perhaps won't be, that of course will not be repeated again in the future. When it comes, say, to the preliminary hearing, which is the next stage, so next slide, at that point, the preliminary hearing happens with one magistrate and two honorary judges, one man and one woman. And this very last feature is binding. So each decision shall be taken by both a man and a woman when it comes to honorary judges. In this particular case, they are considering a trial. So, but in this very case also, upon consensus of the defendant, we might actually shorten the proceedings. And the judge, so the magistrate and the two honorary judges might actually come to a final sentence. It might dismiss, it might forgive because of a mild crime, of course, as I said. So at that point, the magistrate may dismiss the proceedings, and also judiciary forgiveness that also takes place when there is a recognition. So let's say that the defendant is pleading himself guilty, he understands and he declares he was responsible for that. But of course, there shouldn't be any risk of replicating. There might be a conviction in the end, either through a money fine penalty, or else one of the most important measures that can be taken is a kind of a trial period. What is a trial period? Well, it is the possibility to suspend the trial for a period of time which is not greater than 3 years. Within those 3 years, the minor will go through a rehabilitation journey. And if that is successful, then no longer he will be charged with any crime. But of course, the trial period only happens if the defendant is pleading himself guilty. So the minor shall say, I've made a mistake, I'm taking on responsibility of what I've done. And also, the minor has to be happy to take on a rehabilitation journey. And that might happen under many shapes and forms. It might be volunteering for institutions, or it might also be involved in a legal mediation event, meeting up with the victim of his very crime. And one last aspect, and that is the debate, which is the trial. Perhaps I've gone too much further with my slide. The debate takes place with two magistrates and two honorary judges. And in this very case, what happens is that the final verdict can either be dismissal, forgiveness, or else there might be a trial period that is being decided for the minor who committed the crime. When we shift to the civil law, so to my next slide, when it comes, say, to the civil law, now, the key competence, of course, is related to the control on the parental responsibility. So, unless otherwise requested, of course, it will be up to the parental responsibility. And what competencies are we talking about here? Well, the very first one is actually to make sure that the parents are responsible with the minor. Law 630 actually foresees that the court will take place in these very scenarios. And whenever there is an infringement, there's a violation of parental responsibility, well, they might actually be suspended.
delle esigenze, la responsabilità genitoriale non è così grave.
When in the event, let's say, in case there's a bias and the scenario it is not so severe, let's say that the court is also competent for perhaps disqualification of the minor, and actually I'm now anticipating something that my colleague Machi will then further dig into in a moment. So let's say that it is up to the court to decide on how to recover the parental responsibility that are not being fulfilled in full. Other competences within the civil law, as I was saying, is the disqualification of the minor in the proceeding reaching age of age. And another important activity that is often including the juvenile court has to do with Article 31. So a foreign parent will stay on Italian territory along with the minor, so authorizing a parent to stay, to remain in Italy. And that is actually referring to a New York Convention that has been ratified in Italy in 1991. So that foresees in the event there are some major problems from a psychophysical development standpoint, then the foreign parent will remain in Italy for 1 to 2 years to take care of that child. Another important competence for the juvenile court have to do with minors who have been taken elsewhere and unlawfully, so unlawfully relocation. And that is often the case when one of the two parents actually was born and lives elsewhere. And this has to do with the Hague Convention, ratified in Italy. Another important area of intervention has to do with adoption. So when the child is being adopted, and when he reaches age majority, so he's at least 18 years old, he may access information concerning his origin as well as the details of his biological parents. Again, within the civil law, when it comes to adoption, also another aspect is declaring the possibility for a child to be adopted, either through foster care or through adoption. The key difference between the two is that foster care foresees that the parents are only temporarily unable to look after the child, whereas adoption takes place whenever the child is either being abandoned or isolated permanently. So a minor, a child, is actually victim of that last scenario. At that point, he becomes eligible for adoption. It is up to the court, to the juvenile court, to assess that actually the minor is being abandoned. So there's no parent whatsoever capable to support him from a psychological and from a material standpoint for him to grow. Other actions have to do with the custody of the financial assets. But that is something that I will leave to my colleague to deep dive into. When it comes, say, to adoptability, well, we have to clarify the difference between national and international. National adoption is allowed to a marriage couple that lives for 3 years, or they have been living together at least permanently for 3 years. Then the court will, of course, will ask for additional information around the personal scenarios of the couple, and will entrust the social services to investigate further to make sure that that very family can actually adopt a child. At that point, adoption may actually take place. the couple is being called in by the judge and they get to know each other. When it comes to the international adoption, so when it comes to international, well, very similar regulations, similar rules are in place. But when it comes to the application can only be presented to the juvenile court where the couple lives. So in that very territorial jurisdiction. Once the couple is being considered as suitable to adopt the child, they shall speak to one of the authorized bodies. As the procedures are being taken care by some specific bodies and agencies who are taking care of the matching journey, so to speak, and that is actually the same that takes care also of international adoption. And this, of course, concludes when a family being described as suitable can finally adopt a child, either Italian or foreign. One last chapter that has to do with the admin work is very much the administrative procedures, and they refer to minors with some behavioral problems or issues. In this case, we do not take any actions on parental responsibility, but we do work with children directly whenever they're struggling with their behaviors, and that is a very broad range of scenarios, of course, and that has to do with the teenagers mainly. I would say those aged between 12, 16, 17 years of age who are struggling to accept the rules and where perhaps the parents are not effectively managing. In this case, the court may actually extend their task up until the teenager becomes 21, even up to 25 years of age. And now, when it comes to the juvenile court, overall, I have to say that the interest of minor is at the very center of all decisions being made. And all of the activities, all decisions are being taken where once all the parties have been duly represented, either through a lawyer or let's say in person, and so that all rights are being protected. Of course, then the court will also speak and refer to social services, territorial social services, and there are many of these agencies nationwide, and their task will be to collect all the relevant information needed for the court to make the most effective decision. And I will actually leave to my colleague to actually tackle the next topic. I hope I've been able to summarize quickly enough. Within this context, I do believe that also will be it will be my, let's say, my colleague who will be deep diving into the foster care. So thank you so much for your attention so far.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marco Biali, for the very interesting presentation. I know it's not easy to summarize so many information. So before we proceed to the presentation of Francesca Maci, can we quickly address one of the questions that are coming? Because one of the participants was asking if you can better clarify what is an honorary judge. Before we proceed, so it's clear for everybody.
Allora, la legislazione italiana appunto
Now,
prevede
Italian legislation foresees that the collegial body is made up of magistrates, law school graduates who have a legal background and have a law degree. Those magistrates are experts, in their topic. Honorary judges are still graduates who have an expertise in other aspects, education, pedagogy, psychology. Through their support, they may actually complement the best decision making. Their look, their glance won't just be applying the rules, but it will be applying the rules within certain journeys where there's also recovery of the parental responsibility, for instance, and recovering the minor as well. So this possibility of actually intertwining magistrate's expertise with more social psychological expertise allows the juvenile court to tackle minors issues. So to actually focus on the key interest of the child. So, and this is actually happening thanks to these roles. So both magistrates and honorary judges. Honorary judges will contribute with their professionality to decision making. They're being appointed in their role for 3 years, and their role, let's say, the office can be extended for some additional years because of this important expertise that they deliver and contribute with. I hope I answered the question effectively.
l'ultima cosa importante è che hanno lo stesso potere dei giudici togati.
Yeah,
no?
thank you so much. I
Perfetto.
think we got the explanation and the information needed to have a clear picture of this role. And speaking about honorary judge, we can now hand over to the next and final speaker and for today, Francesca Macci. Please welcome. We are also going to display your PowerPoint right away.
foster community, so that the community can take care of the child, but also the foster parents. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, I have to say that foster care is perceived and understood, as I said before, as a time-limited, a temporary, transient intervention. And the reason is the following. I mean, foster care has to be carefully used in some cases, especially in those cases where we have a positive prognosis or a positive forecast. As I said before, the original families, the original parents may go through some difficulties. They can be helped so that they can go back to the previous positive situation and children can be reunited. The Italian law says that the family foster system can last 2 years. Now, the 2 years may be repeated or, let's say, extended for a longer time, because in that case, we are still waiting for the improvements of the original family. So the original family needs a little bit more time. And again, the child has to stay in the foster family because the original parents still have, a long way to go. Now, I'd like to draw your attention on this fundamental point, especially because, the Italian legislature doesn't, specify exactly how long this system can continue for. I mean, I told you about 2 years, but I mean, this 2-year, let's say, interval may be repeated for an unlimited number of times. So what actually happens is that, yes, we do some foster cases that may last many years. The so-called sine die, so endless foster agreements. Usually they start when the child is really, really very small, when if he or she is an infant, and then they can continue, for example, for more than 20 years. Now, in Italy, foster care, as other speakers have said, or as you must have seen or heard in many other meetings. Now, this is consensual, so of course we have to have the consent of parents. In this case, we have a direct relationship with the social services, with the local social services, without the involvement of the court. Or it can be judicial. Now, when the decision is judicial, well, it happens without the approval or without the consent of the original parents, but this is the consequence of a decision of the court. Now, the court does this to protect the minor. There's a so-called decree or order. In this case, we have the so-called judicial foster care, which is not consensual. Basically, the minor's court takes care of the foster, once again, of the judicial or forced foster, within the framework that Mr. Obiali talked about before. I mean, we do have a sort of a limit of the parenting responsibilities. Now, when the court declares the need of a family foster system, well, basically, this is what happens. I mean, the minor, so the child, from the legal or judicial point of view, he or she is, let's say, taken care of by social services. They become a sort of a tutor or a replacement parents. And the minor is placed at the foster family. Now, this means that this is not a direct foster to the foster family. This means that the foster family becomes a sort of a collaborator. So they become a sort of a collaborator of the court and of the local social services. And again, the family will, manage daily the daily needs of the child. But in this case, the legal responsibility of the child falls within the local social services. In this very case, it's not the social services, but it is the municipality, so the administration of the city where the foster family lives. So let me go back. As I said before, the court says that we need a foster care for their child. Of course, in this case, there's a sort of a prejudice, so a risk, a lack of protection for the minor. So we need to find a so-called alternative context or an alternative family option. So based on what Article 1 says that I have just mentioned, Of course, this context has to be a specific context where, we have to have a family. So once again, we look for a foster family. Now, in all of these cases, the court doesn't take care directly of the matching phase. So the court doesn't physically really look, for the foster family. And this is something that someone else is doing. This is done by the local social services. So we have a complete social services system, and of course they are also involved in looking for foster families, and they manage foster children. So we can say that the court cooperates with the local social services because they are responsible for looking for the families. So once again, the local social services will look for a foster family. I think we can now move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, as I said before, the matching phase and all of the, if you will, definition of the entire foster project. So once again, we implement the project, we monitor the project on a daily basis. Once again, this is done by the local social services that on a regular basis, periodically, thanks to a written report, but also thanks to interviews with foster parents. This is usually done by the honorary judges. Of course, we keep the court informed about, the every single foster situation. So the court, once again, thanks to hearings with the honorary judges, will keep this kind of direct monitoring action onto the foster system. In some cases, the court meets parents. In many cases, the court officials meet the child after 12 years of age. In some cases, even before 12 years, when they think that this is useful. So when we think that the child is mature enough in order to be there at the hearing, and at the same time we meet, again, as I said before, the foster parents to have steady, consistent, feedback sessions on the foster care. Next slide, please. Thank you. As you can see in this slide, yes, sometimes we have some specific situations where the court has a direct management of the foster child. Now, case number one, there are some situations where, because, if you will, of issues having to do with the adoption or adoptability conditions. So we don't have the right conditions so as the child can be adopted, but at the same time, the child cannot go back to that family. He or she cannot be sent back to the family because parents didn't manage, to solve a difficult situation. Maybe, they are still having large difficulties. So in those specific cases where the child cannot be sent back to the original family, it is the court that can, find a foster family. So in this case, there's a direct contact between the court and the possible foster family. So once again, we ask, the family if they are still available. So this child cannot be adopted, but at the same time, he or she cannot go back to his or her family. It will be, let's say, a long-term foster case. In some cases, as I said before, thanks to the honorary judges, the local court will get in touch with the families available in the local community. The court selects or chooses, let's say, the best fit family so that, as many conditions as possible can be met. So once again, this is a long-term foster case. This is a very special, very unique condition because we ask a family, if you will, to become parents, of this child for the rest of his life, but we can't tell them that they are adoptive parents, because there is no adoption in those cases. And we ask them to also entertain relationships with the original family. Now, this is an interesting point, in my opinion, for you to know. One of the fundamental features of our intervention within the Italian context is the following. During the foster period, the child keeps in touch regularly, consistently with the original family, so with his or her parents. There are just some, exceptions where this cannot be done because there are really very, very big difficulties. There's a second specific situation that you can see here in the slide, where the local court manages directly the family, the foster family or the foster care, is the so-called judicial risk foster. So can you go back to the previous slide? Okay, thank you. Foster care with legal risk. Here we go. This is the second point. Now, in this case, I'm talking about another special situation. So as you can see here in the court, basically, now the adoption procedure is going on. So it is an ongoing procedure. This means that we are, collecting details and information, but the child hasn't yet been declared adoptable. Now, the judge thinks that what is really, really very important is to protect the interest and the best interest of the child. So the child has to move to a foster family as quickly as possible because of some special difficult conditions. So in this case, we say that this is a foster care with a legal risk, so waiting for adoption. In this case, we choose a foster family, and the family, of course, has declared, their, let's say, availability for adoption. Okay, last but not least, can you go to slide 7, so the last one, if I'm not mistaken, thank you. I'd like to go through the very last piece of reform that we have had on the law that is now managing foster but also adoption. So this is the act I have just mentioned. In this case, I'm drawing your attention on Act 173, approved in 2015, so almost 6 years ago. So this is what happened 6 years ago. We have reintroduced a key concept. The child has the right to the so-called continuity of affective bonds. So, in a nutshell, I can tell you that Act 173 is a real revolutionary, disruptive piece of legislation, because in Italy, both foster and adoption, from the legislative point of view, but also from the operating point of view, have always been kept on two different levels, or two different, tracks, if you will. Adoption has specific objectives and foster has different objectives. So we want to make sure that, the key objectives of foster is to make sure the child can go back home. So this is a temporary experience. Sometimes families, were sort of confused and they wanted, to adopt the child right away. Now, there's been so many, have been so many reactions, from the foster care associations. We raised a very important issue. There are very many children that after, years and years of, foster in a family, they are adoptable because now the conditions of their parents are now very severe. Of course, the child cannot go back to the original family. They are no longer able to take care of their children. So these children become adoptable. But it's a pity to close the foster and being adopted by another family. This would be a huge emotional, relational trauma that we want to avoid, because there would be basically an uprooting from the alternative foster family to be moved to another family, the adopted family. So in these situations, during foster, the child is declared adoptable because of the worsening of the situation of his or her parents. The court, based on this new Act 173, approved in 2015, they consider the best interest of children and the, let's say, avoidance of affective, bond traumas. So the foster family may become the adoptive family for the child. Now, what has to happen for the court to do so? We have two key conditions that have to be met. Now, there's a strong affective bond between the child and the foster family. And the second condition is that the relationship between the child and the foster family is characterized by stability and continuity of the relationship itself. Furthermore, the foster family, of course, has to have a list of features or conditions included into the Italian legislation to become adoptive parents. So in this case, in order for me to, remove the child from the, family and to avoid, an impact on the affective bonds, we have a sort of overlapping between foster and adoption, thanks to Act 173, which is based on continuity of the affective relationship. So in a nutshell, I have, walked you through the general Italian framework. This is what the courts are doing in order to protect the child and their well-being. This is it. Thank you so much. Don't hesitate if you have possible questions. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Francesca Maci, for the elaborate presentation. Participants, I think now we are getting into the session of question and answer. We've received some questions through the chat box from different participants. Mostly we have questions relating to issues of foster care vis-a-vis adoption, and I believe that not only are we going to have clarifications coming from the end of Advocate Roslyn Kabata, I believe also one of the directors is going to clarify on the same. But also we have a question relating to statistics and the system capturing children in foster care. We want to understand whether we have such a system and if we have statistics coming from the same system. So I wish to invite Madam Roslyn to be able to respond to these questions. Thank you. Okay. Madam Roslyn, I hope you are there. Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
System that we piloted in Makadara Law Court. But that's the only court we've been able to work with. For the CPMS, I know it's under the Department of Children's Services, so I think they're best placed to, representative from DCS is best placed to answer that. What was the other question? Sorry.
The other question related to the differences between foster care and adoption, so that we get to understand the issue of the involvement of biological parents and to what extent biological parents are not involved.
Biological parents in foster care is only where there's an arrangement for maintenance of the child. So under foster care, any person who's under that arrangement has fostered a child has parental responsibility over that child temporarily. And this is what makes foster care a temporary arrangement for up to 3 years. But for parents who are still existent and want to take care of the child, even if the child is under foster care, they can make an arrangement between the foster parent and themselves to maintain the child. So I would think this would be instances where maybe the parent is a drug user and they have given the child up for foster care, but they still want to take care of the child in terms of maintenance or even the guardian. So they make an arrangement with the foster parent on this, and the Department of Children's Services facilitates this. And the difference between foster care and adoption is the permanency. So foster care is a temporary arrangement of parental responsibility, and then adoption is a permanent arrangement of alternative family care. So under adoption, the child is entitled to even inheritance. So if there's a case of succession where the adoptive parent dies, the adopted child is entitled to part of the adoptive parent's estate. And adoption is not reversible, so it's permanent. And if there's anyone who is seeking to revoke it, they have to make report. Yes. So the difference between adoption and foster care is just the permanency and also the entitlement of the child. Under foster care, a child is not entitled to the foster care parent's estate. Thank you.
For all the clarifications. Before I pass the opportunity to Madam Director, we just want to confirm that all the presentations and recordings of the webinar are going to be shared at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Boniface. I just wanted to also add that in Kenya, foster care is a maximum of 3 years. Unlike Italy, I can see it's a maximum of 2 years. And also, it is not done in the court. We do it at the children offices. So we don't really have to go to court. I also realized that in Italy, you transit foster care to adoption. In Kenya, we don't transit. After the maximum 3 years elapse, the child should be placed in another form of care, especially that it should be permanent since it's a temporary intervention. So we could still compare and see that there is a lot that we can learn from Italy that is not in Kenya, and I'm sure even Italy can also learn what we are doing in Kenya as far as foster care is concerned. But above all, we are considering the best interest of the child and also trying to strengthen the families to take care of these children, especially those who are in need of foster care. So I'm sure with the other presentations that we'll have tomorrow, on Wednesday and Friday, we learn a lot about the foster care, and we cannot avoid to focus on adoption because some of the children also are in need of adoption at the end of the day. I think we have come to the end of the virtual training today, and we want to thank everyone who is on board today, that we've had a very educative session, that we have learned a lot, and it's very interesting. This is a training that people were supposed to go to Italy physically, and very few people, but it's a blessing in disguise that with COVID, we are able to have so many people or officers who have been able to attend, and we are sure by Friday we would have been able to benefit a lot. So let's meet on Wednesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. We will have presentations from different presenters, and especially in Kenya, we are able to have our CEO for the National Council for Children take us through on the care reforms. That's Abdunur. We'll also have our county coordinators from 2 counties, that is Kisumu and Murang'a, to give us the experiences on the implementation, and also many presentations will come from the Italian team. I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody and thank you for being patient until this time. Thank you so much. See you on Wednesday.